Okay, everyone, gather around for a fairly long video because we're going to talk about the Elizabeth Powell Diaries. She had diaries from 1854 through 1916. And yes, I am talking about one of the first teachers in my master's thesis. This is a longer video because it is a longer story. I'm going to be reading straight from the book. It's going to be a bit, so settle in, grab your popcorn, and listen to what it's going to be like for a woman who starts teaching in California right as the gold rush has started, okay? Among the first wave of women to become California teachers during the gold rush era, Elizabeth Powell took on the challenges of teaching in the San Francisco Bay Area and was successful in many ways. She embraced teaching duties and achieved career advancement when she became a principal. Her diary recounts her rise to this respectable position and, more importantly, the circumstances of her daily life as a teacher. Through Powell's eyes, we see what it was like to be a migrant teacher in the Bay Area in the early schools of California. Elizabeth Powell, a deeply religious New York teacher, traveled by steamer from New York to California to begin a teaching job in 1868. While in California, she kept a diary she had commenced in New York a dozen years before. She wrote in her diary what it was like to be a teacher and offered rich personal insights into a teacher's life during the 1860s and 1870s when California was still a frontier. In her diary, she noted her personal views of her career in a manner that reflected her sense of humor, her frustrations, and her devout faith in God. Her diary reminiscences are key to understanding life for a 19th century teacher from the East who journeyed to California to earn more money than she could in New York. Powell worked in an unorganized school system without formalized procedures for obtaining a teaching job, classroom attendance, daily lesson plans, arranging a place to live, or job security. Further, she faced many difficulties as a migrant teacher in a primitive school environment. Her challenges included poor weather conditions that hindered student attendance, keeping rodents and reptiles out of the classroom, moving around from year to year, and adapting to the various teaching positions she held. Through it all, Powell maintained a strong faith in God's will as her dreams of marriage and having a home were never fulfilled. Elizabeth Powell, a courageous, adventurous woman, proved her mettle and ability to embrace the challenges she faced throughout her teaching career. Born on March 6, 1838 in New York State, Elizabeth Powell grew up in a family that consisted of her father, Westall W. Powell, her mother, Susan Benham, and 4 daughters. Powell provided little information about her family in the diary, aside from letters she mentioned that came from her family when she was a young student at an unidentified normal school in New York State near Auburn. And for those of you who don't know, normal schools are what you would go to learn how to become a teacher. So there she followed a well-structured curriculum that included philosophy, rhetoric, grammar, algebra, chemistry, writing, drawing, moral science, natural philosophy, which was called science, and geometry. After graduating from normal school in 1855, Powell took a teaching position in Louisiana, where she taught for approximately 2 years. She returned to New York around 1859. By 1862, Powell was in Albany, New York, giving music lessons and teaching French to the children in the community. 5 years later, she decided to move to California because of the lack of teaching opportunities in New York State. Her move to California was sponsored by her cousin, James Pearson, who arranged for Powell to travel to the state by steamer. Borrowing money for the voyage from relatives, Powell set sail for San Francisco at age 31, hoping to find a new future in teaching. When she arrived in San Francisco, she took a steamer to Sacramento and joined her cousin there on June 28, 1868. Shortly thereafter, Powell went to the office of the county superintendent of schools to copy down the addresses of local and district superintendents, intending to solicit teaching positions from them. She hoped to secure a position lucrative enough to enable her to send for her sister Amanda and Amanda's children. Powell's hope of making a good living teaching in California was sparked by meeting a well-dressed woman on the steamer to Sacramento. The woman taught at the Lincoln School in San Francisco and was on her summer vacation. Quote, "My roommate was a young lady, a teacher in the Lincoln Primary School of San Francisco. She was out on a pleasure trip during the summer vacation. California teachers are furnished passes for some of the railroads and steamboats free, and for others at half price. Hurrah for California! And the California teachers are not such a forlorn-looking, poverty-stricken set as the Albany and Brooklyn teachers. Those I have seen look as though they might have plenty of money for dress and books." Unquote. She too wished to have enough money to achieve a similar appearance, courtesy of her first California teaching job in Pike City. Powell had traveled for quite a while to reach her teaching job, but by August 1868, she had reached her final destination, Pike City, California. She quickly adjusted to her new teaching job and accommodations with the Swartz family, whose children were among her pupils. Boarding around with one of or several families in the school district was the common experience of women teachers in the 19th century. Typically, parents of several children in the school provided hospitality. The schoolwomen who boarded with families found that the living conditions ranged from intolerable to a real home away from home. The existing scholarship indicates that conditions obviously varied. Some homes were ruder than others, and teachers sometimes had their own rooms. Other times, the teachers had to share a bedroom or a bed with family members. Children either lovingly adored their teacher or disliked their guest enough to play pranks on her. The food ranged from inadequate to plentiful. Oh my God, can you imagine tolerating that as a teacher now? Living with people, sharing a bed? Ooh. Powell's boarding situation usually included meals shared with the host family, her own room, and little privacy. Usually, transportation was not guaranteed in most of the communities she taught. The school was located nearby, which was a blessing, for none of the families offered her transportation to work. In her diary entries, Powell never expressed dissatisfaction with the family she stayed with, and her job duties did not seem to take her longer than 12 hours per week. She often had time to write letters to family that she composed in the family dining room, to exercise, and to attend church, since she did not indicate she assisted with the family's chores. The friendly family she stayed with helped Powell adjust to a frontier school system and the special challenges she found in her working environment in Pike City. Though Powell dove into her work, she had a little trouble adjusting to the new frontier culture, for she experienced working conditions that she was not used to. For example, she had to work in a rundown schoolhouse that was home to rodents and lizards, where one immense lizard promenaded across the room in an almost too free and easy style. Nails jutted out of the walls that served as hat hangers. In contrast, splinters served as embroidery needles, and the schoolyard consisted of big logs, odds and ends of building timber, piles of broken glass and brushwood, and patches of tar weed, alternated with patches of dust 4 or 5 inches thick. She gave a vivid and humorous account of her classroom in an essay she wrote in preparation for her first meeting at the Teachers Institute, a mandatory educational program for California teachers. The essay reflects her sense of classroom humor, her working environment, and her reactions to the hazards of the frontier. In her explanation of her decision to write about her classroom for the Teachers Institute meeting, Powell commented, "I think it a pity that such a rare and curious specimen of architecture should be allowed to pass without notice." And she continued her description of her crudely built building. The schoolhouse was poorly built, and the cracks and knotholes between the wooden planks on the walls were large enough for sufficient air circulating throughout the room to prevent any danger of its occupancy becoming musty. While making the schoolhouse, the builder did not properly level the planks in the walls because the lower ends of the planks are sawed in such a manner that no two are at the same distance from the ground, and I am puzzled to know whether the man who sawed them was trying to imitate stairs or terrace, or whether he wished the lengths of his planks to illustrate the relative heights of the Sierra Nevada mountains. The schoolhouse windows received attention as well. Powell noted that the architect placed the windows so high that they cannot possibly look out of them unless the students stand on tiptoe and stretch their necks like young turkeys, As this was not very agreeable, they generally prefer to give their attention to objects inside of the room and must, of course, either contemplate my beauty or look at their books. Powell commented on the schoolroom furniture too. She wrote that variety is the spice of life, and the man took care that no two should be alike. Most of the desks seemed to have been intended for men of Goliath's stature. Not only was the furniture ill-suited to the small stature of the pupils, but the desktops were at such an angle that writing upon them was difficult. Quote, one desk has the right height and slope for writing, but it is always seized with St. Vidi's dance as soon as anyone comes in contact with it. Then there is a venerable center table, which has upon it the mold of antiquity, and with whose height I am satisfied, but unfortunately it has the palsy and St. Vidi's dance combined. Not only did Powell have to tolerate a crude building, but she also encountered pests that inhibited learning within the classroom. A half-grown mouse dropped from above and almost hit me in the head. The next morning, when I opened the door, I found another of the family lying on the floor in its last agonies. Fear that by Monday I shall find so many that have been killed by a fall from the roof to the floor that I shall be obliged to close school and have a funeral. While I was reading a thrilling chapter from St. John's Gospel, a little girl who was sitting with her back against the side of the house called, "There's a snake above me!" The snake proved to be a good-sized frog which had wetted itself into a big crack behind the child's neck. Can you imagine teaching in this environment? Come on. Powell's description of her classroom ended with the following warning intended for communities who planned on constructing new schoolhouses. I might as well stop writing, for my schoolhouse must be seen in order to be fully appreciated, and I advise all who have anything to do with the construction of school buildings to visit it before they erect any new ones. Powell's essay, narrated in a light, humorous fashion, proved that she had a resilience that helped her adapt to extreme working conditions. Teaching was difficult because of the inadequate physical condition of the classroom. Powell confronted other challenges on the job, such as student absences and irregular paychecks. Her students were not always in attendance. Heavy rains common to the region and illness often kept them away. Family chores, however, were the major causes of student absences. The tasks assigned to the children usually included chopping wood and clearing fields, preparing the ground for planting, bringing in crops, hunting for lost cows, and doing the family's laundry. According to the inhabitants, these responsibilities were more important than book learning in a new and growing town like Pike City. Although Powell noted the absences, she did not complain to her students or their parents about their being absent from school or not valuing education. She did complain, however, about not getting paid on time. At the beginning of her term in Pike City, her pay was distributed irregularly. Eventually, Powell received her payments in a timely manner each month. Obviously, teaching was not easy in a frontier community. Powell used her diary to vent her frustrations and express her homesickness and loss over loved ones in the East. She missed her family dearly and felt compassion for a good friend who also left loved ones behind. Seeking employment, a friend and fellow teacher, Alice Thompson, had moved to California shortly after Powell, leaving her baby behind with its grandmother. While empathizing with her friend, Powell also feared being poor, homeless, and single. Her fears were compounded by her being so far away from loved ones. For quite a while, Powell was pursued by someone who loved her, Mr. LeBlanc, whom she met shortly after her arrival in California. Powell never returned his love for her and declined his marriage proposal. To carry herself through the loneliness, Powell often sought grace and understanding to accept God's will of her. Quote, I begin to be very anxious to know what work God has in store for me this fall. Man's goings are of the Lord. How can a man then understand his way? I know that as my day is, so my strength shall be. And why need I fear? I do feel so desolate and discouraged sometimes when I consider that I have arrived at the age of 30 and am homeless and poor and have no prospect of ever being anything else. Why cannot I be satisfied to learn the lessons of the class in which God has placed me and wait patiently until he sees fit to put me in a higher? If I could only find it meat and drink to do his will. Unquote. Powell's immediate circumstances motivated her to pray for patience, acceptance, and resignation so that she might eventually gain a husband and a home. Her anxiety probably reflected social expectations for 19th century women. Women were highly valued and whole if they held the titles of wife, mother, and homemaker. Her diary entries indicate that she felt she was worth little if she did not have a married woman's full life. Unfortunately for Powell, her boarding arrangements lacked privacy and were less than ideal for courtship purposes. Yet Powell endured her situation and kept her faith in God, praying that things would turn around. Fortunately, the hardships of teaching a class in an extremely isolated mining town did not last long. As soon as the school term was finished, Powell packed her bags and headed off to San Francisco to find a teaching job in a less rustic and more settled work environment. On October 10, 1868, she inquired at the office of the county superintendent of San Mateo and soon after was awarded a job in San Bruno, where she lived with the Ogden family. Boarding with the Ogdens was a happy situation for her, and she felt like part of the family after a short while. So much so that she wished to stay in San Bruno and buy a home. While at the Ogdens' home, she wrote about preparing for a typical school day. Quote, Mr. Ogden built a fire in the schoolroom in order to get some of the dampness out of it, and after a while I went in and brushed the floor, washed the table, dusted the chairs, and got my writing materials, and Guy Mannering preparatory to have a comfortable, pleasant time. I seated myself on the floor in a corner and commenced to read, unquote. It is not clear how many students Powell taught while boarding with the Ogden family because her diary entries did not give any details or names of students other than those of the Ogden children. However, it appears that she was a private teacher for the Ogden children and their neighbors' children in a schoolhouse either erected by the Ogdens or located close by. Teaching positions of this sort were common and normally gained by soliciting the superintendent. The teaching positions ranged from the lower level of chambermaid/tutor in a private home to the more prestigious level of teaching the upper grade levels in a district school. Personal solicitation of the superintendent for teaching opportunities in various settings was common in California during the 1850s and 1860s, and Powell and her contemporaries were quite familiar with the practice. Just as Powell had become happy with her teaching position with the Ogden family, her friend Alice experienced problems with her employers. This San Francisco family had her working as a sort of combination of seamstress, governess, and chambermaid, which I think must be a decidedly disagreeable position, although she is brave and tries to look at the bright side of things. Powell did her best to help Alice find a new situation with the help of her former suitor, Mr. LeBlanc. She campaigned hard to find Alice an agreeable job, yet by the time an offer came through Powell's efforts, Alice had acquired a new position on her own. Alice Thompson's job search highlights the instability and insecurity 19th century California teachers experienced. 6 months later, in October of 1869, Powell found her position with the Ogden family threatened. She was offered a new position as a private teacher near Alice. However, she declined because she wanted to stay with the Ogden family, whom she adored. She wrote about her offer and her living conditions with the Ogdens. Quote, Mr. Cahoon, in whose family Alice Thompson is boarding this summer, has offered me $35 per month and my traveling expenses if I will teach his grandchildren. I would be allowed to take all the music pupils I might be able to get in Soquel and Santa Cruz, and probably would have the district school, which Alice has, during 8 months of the year at $66 per month. Now, this all looks very desirable, but I am loath to leave Mr. Ogden's family. I fear it will never again be my good fortune to be with such agreeable people and to have such a desirable home. I fancy there might be more satisfaction in teaching Mr. Cahoon's children than in teaching Lulu and Eddie Ogden, but perhaps there wouldn't be. I think Mr. Ogden will go to Los Angeles or to some other place within 6 months where I will have a chance to make more money than I am making. At any rate, Mr. and Mrs. Ogden are honorable people and will do as well by me as they can afford to do. Mr. Cahoon is coming to see me this week, but I believe I shall tell him that I prefer to stay in this family and take my chances of doing better after a while. Unfortunately, once the Ogdens found that Powell had chosen to stay with them, they began to show discontent with her and acted less hospitable than before, treating her more like one of their servants rather than a teacher. She recorded her feelings about the sun in Turnabout. Quote, "This has been rather a dismal day to me. My composure was disturbed in the first place by not having an opportunity to go to church. Although during the first few months of my being here, I was always invited except when there was company here. The servants go the first Sunday of each month, and probably Mrs. Ogden thinks that I, like other servants, ought to be satisfied with going once a month. If I have no invitation to go next Sunday, I'll go in the cars, always. Never in the carriage again while I am here. I went off for a walk after lunch, and when I returned at 4:30 they had finished dinner. Mrs. Ogden did not say one word to me about having anything to eat, but some pie was standing on the table, and so I ate a piece of that and walked off upstairs. I was real hungry and would have liked something more. Never mind. Perhaps I'll be rich and independent some day, and then I'll have as much as I wish to eat, and a horse, and will go to church when I please. There are many things which show me plainly that I have already stayed here too long, so I'll make the best arrangement I can for the spring and then be off. I shall try to get at the school in Mr. Cahoon's district and board at his house. I pray for God's blessing and direction. I wonder if Mrs. Ogden will ever recall the promise which she so rashly made that I should always have a home in her house as long as she had one. Ahem." Unquote. Soon after Powell wrote this entry in her diary, she contacted Mr. Cahoon and accepted his offer in March of 1870. The next entry in Powell's diary was written in Mr. Cahoon's district in Soquel 1 year later on her birthday, March 6, 1871. She wrote that she was now 33 years old and that her heart had been broken by a man who married another woman. This man, whom she identified as Rochester, must have entered her life during her first year of teaching in Soquel. She took comfort in her belief that God had other plans for her. Quote, "God's ways are not as our ways, but he doeth all things well. And so, although he who should have been my husband has become, according to law, the husband of another, I'll try to live contentedly without him. I'll pray for grace and strength to do God's work and to cast all my care upon him, and will ask to be made perfect in faith, hope, and charity." Although her love life did not go as she had wished, Powell's teaching career in Soquel proved profitable. She gave 17 music lessons per week at $1 per lesson and saved $240.25. By age 34, she expected to have saved $1,000. With these savings, she hoped someday to have a home of her own. Working in Soquel appeared to be a positive move for Powell all around because her boarding situation had also improved. She had a room of her own, complete with her books, a table, treasured pictures on the wall, a bureau, a vase filled with English violets, daisies, pansies, and pincushion, which Mrs. Ogden made for me, and much-loved canary bird named Dottie Dimple. Judging from her diary entry, Powell appeared content as a private teacher in Soquel. Her next entry was written a year later on April 21st, 1872, when she told us about her latest boarding situation in Soquel. Powell did not explain why she let a year go by before making another entry. Several reasons may account for her silence. The first reason is that she became so busy in her teaching job that she didn't have time to write. Another reason may be that Powell used her diary to vent her frustrations and did not write because she was happy and content in the months she made no entries. Why she failed to write will never be known. Some historians have found that California pioneers of the 19th century commonly wrote journals with the hope that their manuscripts would someday become published. There is no evidence in the diary to suggest she intended to publish her diary, but she appears to have used the diary to record events in her life that she wished to look back upon later. With the entry of April 21st, 1872, we learn Powell was boarding with a Mrs. Baker in Soquel. Her comments suggest that she and Mrs. Baker were fast friends and enjoying gardening together. Following their Sunday morning promenade among the flowers, Powell attended a church service, followed by an evening of reading and writing letters to relatives. These activities took the edge off of her loneliness and longing for loved ones in New York. Unfortunately, Powell did not indicate whether she was still teaching Mr. Cahoon's grandchildren. In fact, she said nothing whatsoever about teaching. However, her next diary entry gives much more information on the subject. Powell's diary entry of March 6, 1873 says that she lived and taught in the San Jose area. She worked in the Hamilton district for $65 monthly for 10 months in a horrid school. She explained why her job situation was so bad. Quote, "My schoolhouse is a combination of all that is dismal and disagreeable. My pupils are most of them tolerably well disposed, but they are fearfully stupid and backward. Boys who are 15 years old, and girls too, get fearfully puzzled over subtraction. Mr. Blackford's children, Lily and May, are the only ones who have made proper advancement in their studies. My term will end the 5th of May. The Hamilton district will have used all its money then. Consequently, the people cannot have any more school until the commencement of another year." Powell's comment on the lack of funding was true of many California schools. Inadequate financial support for schools may explain why the pupils' skills were so low. The district may not have had money for adequate textbooks, nor a school year long enough to allow students to make regular progress in their studies. Unfortunately for Powell, the challenge of getting students up to adequate levels was a difficult one. After Powell described her unfortunate teaching circumstances, she lamented her status as a single woman. She wrote how she wished for a husband, home, and baby. She hoped she would be a wife because she felt marriage would save her from a life of loneliness. Then she described a man with whom she was smitten, Mr. Alex Hess, the brother of the man whose family she boarded with. She was very interested in him as a mate because "I know he'd be a devoted husband and father." Sad to say, Hess did not become her husband. Powell's unfulfilled wishes for marriage possibly led her to seek comfort in popular literature and writings, which bolstered her self-image and emphasized the importance of her role as a teacher. She entered noteworthy quotations in her journal from other authors who shared her views about education. One of Powell's favorite authors was Dr. L. Hamilton, who characterized education as the seed that allows man or woman to grow completely. With education, he explained, the person attains personal worth, character, and spiritual growth. Men will be grown, not misers, nor coxcombs, nor bloats. Women, not dolls, nor lay figures for the dry goods merchant. Unquote. Hamilton saw clearly that education made a person whole and helped to shape children's character and kept them from losing opportunities in life. Quote, "The school is the seed plot and nursery where the growth is started, which the whole afterlife is to carry forward. When its roots are transferred to the open field of practical activities, there should be no change in the primary object, if that growth has been rightly cultured in the beginning. It has been miserably defective if it does not start the pupil forth under the controlling idea and aim that the first and main thing that life is for is to make the largest addition made to personal worth. That the first object of its money getting is to transmute money into man, to turn house and lands into character, to convert stocks and bonds into mind, heart, and soul." Unquote. The second half of the quotations in Powell's diary included Dr. Hamilton's teaching philosophies, which reflected the ideals that guided public education in the 19th century. He urged parents to keep children in school so that they may become true women and men. Hamilton warned that if children were removed from schooling and put to work to make more money for the parents, it will dwarf the children's souls. Hence, parents should make every possible sacrifice to keep their children in school. This quotation may have addressed Powell's frustration over parents keeping children from school to do family chores. Dr. Hamilton's last comments were directed at young pupils. He told them to stay in school and wait patiently for the completion of their education. Hamilton urged the students to reserve their fire until he could deliver it with the best effect. Lastly, he instructed students to serve God during their quest for education, for God will reward them and will not forget them or the services he wants of them. Unquote. There is nothing in the diary to identify Dr. L. Hamilton. Yet Powell's careful recording of his words suggests that she agreed wholeheartedly with his views. Though she did not comment on the quotations in her diary, one may safely assume that she saw his arguments as her own. She likely used Hamilton's words to reinforce her educational ideas and sustain her while teaching in San Jose. Powell's next teaching assignment took her to Oakland, where she stayed until her retirement in 1902. However, her first year in Oakland was not the happiest, according to her next entry, written on her 36th birthday on March 6, 1874. Powell told her diary that she had kept busy with teaching because she did not want to think about her homelessness and loneliness. She boarded with a Mr. Hardwick in Oakland and earned $100 per month, the highest salary she had earned thus far in California. She maintained her love and appreciation of God for giving her the blessings of a good job and higher salary, but still mourned the fact that she did not have a home or a husband. Quote, I am glad that I have to be so busy that I haven't much time to think. As I am homeless and alone all in the world, with nothing bright and pleasant to look forward to, I would soon be unhappy if I were idle. I thank God for this blessing, and I try to thank Him for all my blessings, even though they are in disguise. Yet I am too often rebellious, for my heart is so hungry. How I do want to be made perfect in faith and hope. Unquote. Powell's last diary entry, written in August 31st, 1878, revealed that she lived in West Oakland with Mrs. Nisavander. Her final entry was a quotation written by EAO that celebrated nature and its importance in keeping life balanced. Unfortunately, the quotation does not help the reader determine what Powell was doing. Powell's activities after 1878 are revealed in a letter from the Oakland Teachers Association. The letter, written in 1916, explains a great deal about her career. The letter was written the year of Powell's death, and it commemorates Powell's service in the Oakland school system. Quote, Miss Powell was elected to the Oakland Department on June the 6th, 1878, and was assigned a teaching/principal to the classes held in a room in the old Plymouth Church. When a new building was opened on the site of the present Grant School in January 1885, Miss Powell assumed charge as principal. This position she held until she left the department in July 1902. Many of those children are teaching in the Oakland schools today, and her influence for caretaking work, her absorbing, wholehearted interest in their welfare, mental, spiritual, and physical, live now because she is so impressed with them that they carry the message to the new generation of boys and girls. We, who worked with or under her, pause to thank her for the example she gave us as a God-loving woman. The letter praised Powell and indicated she was an influential teacher whose life seemed fulfilled. For example, her promotion to principal may have been the higher place she so often dreamed of, and Powell's piety and purity led those around her to believe she was a true woman. Her commitment to shaping students' mental, physical, and spiritual lives through education was appreciated by her students, making her a successful and revered educator in the eyes of her peers. In sum, Elizabeth Powell, a pioneer teacher in the San Francisco Bay Area, served the children of California for 34 years. Her diary entries recounted her many experiences as a teacher. She obtained teaching jobs through persistence, personal recommendations, and luck. She encountered rodents and other pests in her primitive classroom in Pike City. She usually boarded with her employers. She had good relationships with her students. The rain, the mud, and the dust hindered classroom productivity. She never married but desperately wanted to. She missed her loved ones and often experienced loneliness. And she reluctantly participated in state-mandated teachers' institutes until her later years when she got involved in the Teachers Club of Oakland. Powell accomplished much in her teaching despite the hardships she endured. Her writings show that being a teacher in the 1860s and 1870s was not always fair or pleasant, yet she maintained her drive to teach and experienced advancement of opportunities as her career progressed. Powell's diaries portray her as an advocate for true womanhood, in a time when piety, purity, submissiveness, and domesticity were highly revered. When she did not marry or own her own home, she worried that she would not achieve her personal goals. Judging from the letter written by the Oakland Teachers Association in 1816, Powell eventually succeeded in her life and career and was honored as a new woman by her peers, who were also successful teachers. Clara Burt, another successful Bay Area teacher who grew up in California and taught there from 1875 to 1876, was a true woman of a different sort. Okay, stay tuned in the next video for the story about Clara Burt, and that's where you'll get a glimpse of what a 19th century classroom looked like in San Jose. All right, see you in the next video.